Our scripture for this evening is John chapter 16, verses 30 through 33. John chapter 16, verses 30 through 33. We are all, no doubt, familiar with the commercial for the Life Alert system. In that commercial, a lady has fallen and she says, "Help, I have fallen and can't get up." Certainly, that concern with the frailty of aging bodies needs to be addressed with all of the safety precautions, the care and concern possible to help take care of our loved ones. In regards to falling, we can easily visualize a physical fall, but sometimes we're not always aware that our faith has fallen. But our faith can get up if we have the fortitude or the wherewithal to get up. If you will, in John chapter 16, there's some interesting things said about faith. Notice these words starting at verse 30. "Now are we sure that thou knowest all things, and needest not that any man should ask thee. By this we believe that thou camest forth from God." Jesus answered them, "Do you now believe? Behold, the hour comes, yea, is now come, that ye shall be scattered, every man to his own, and shall leave me alone, and yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. These things I have spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." What I want you to notice in this passage that shows us that sometimes our faith is not always where it needs to be. Jesus is at a point where he's getting ready to leave this earth, return to the presence of the Father in heaven above. These disciples who have been with him in 3 years of ministry make this interesting claim in verse 30, "Now are we sure." After 3 years of walking with Jesus, it's just then that they find themselves being sure. Before we become critical, how often are we guilty of having walked with Jesus for any number of years and still have not gotten to a point where we can say we are sure? Our faith falls for many different reasons. Sometimes we have these major traumas in our lives that bring about devastation to our total being. Many other times people are suffering not with major traumas, but micro traumas, many things, little things that they have been dealing with over a great period of time. We have failures and faults and other things that cause us to fail in our faith. As we look at this passage, we see an interesting statement where Jesus says to them, "Be of good cheer." They're getting ready to face one of the darkest periods of their lives. Jesus is leaving, and he says persecution and suffering are coming. And yet he says, "Be of good cheer." How appropriate these words are for us today. There are some things that are necessary for us in order to be of good cheer. Number one, as we look at verse 30, we have to come to a point where we have a personal assurance of who Jesus is and his love for us. Remember in verse 30, they says, "Now are we sure." At what point will you be sure? At what point will you come to realize that you are a child of God, that he loves you, and that all of the things you've been singing, You've been reading in the Bible and hearing from sermons and Bible classes. At what point do you say, now I am sure? Number two, you have to have a personal affirmation. In verse 31, Jesus says, now do you believe? Do you now believe? You have to affirm your faith, and that's a very personal matter. Do you really believe in Jesus? I'm not asking you, do you believe in church? I'm not asking you if you believe in the Bible. I'm not asking if you believe in the songs you sing. I'm saying, are you surrendered and submitted to those things that you say you believe? Number three, you have to recognize that even as a child of God, you're going to have personal afflictions. In verse 32, he talks about suffering, persecution, and being scattered. Children of God must recognize that we are not exempt from the worst. We just have access to the best. And so don't be surprised. Don't be like the deer caught in the headlights when trouble troubles you, even though you're not troubling trouble. Number four, you have to have a personal attribute of cheer that must be within you and cannot be given to you from anyone else. It is based on your relationship with God. When he says be of good cheer, that means to be bold, to be confident, and to be courageous. Again, keep in mind, they're getting ready to go through suffering and persecution. And cheer here does not mean just a happy, euphoric feeling. It means boldness, confidence, and courageousness. You cannot face life and find yourself experiencing triumph if you abandon hope and wave the white flag of surrender. So unlike the lady on the television who says, I have fallen and can't get up, I want to suggest to you that if you have fallen in your faith, you can get up. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.